Welcome back to the North American Hearthstone Qualifier Tournament. I'm Robert Worthenwing, joined at the desk by Chalky. And Chalky, what a crazy series that last one turned out to be.
Yeah, I mean, when Muzzy was up 2-0, it kind of looked like, maybe he's just going to wrap this one up pretty quick. And Nias with a really crazy reverse sweep. You could see heavily teched against Patron, and it paid off big.
Yeah, that Acidic Swampu's, got a lot of value there. Ysera Awakens delivered exactly the card it needed to, and we found out that Kit Kats lied about how brawls work. Armor Smith did not beat Ysera, which is fair considering Ysera's a 412.
Yeah, I mean, if you just kind of look at it from a power angle, Armor Smith really, I'm not sure where Kit Kat's got that idea from.
Yeah, it's a really silly idea. Anyway, we're about to get into the next matchup here, which is going to be Amaz versus Allandang. Obviously, we saw both of those players pretty recently.
Yep.
Amaz is running a little bit less of a conventional lineup, whereas Allandang's kind of gone with what's considered to be the common line of this tournament, which is the Druid, Warlock, Patron, Warrior, or Druid, Patron, Warrior lineup. So
yeah. I do think that is the lineup, just the top three classes we've really seen, whereas Amaz is bringing in that Mech Mage. We've kind of speculated maybe that's because he doesn't feel as comfortable with the Patron Warrior deck, but, the Mech Mage has been working out for him. We've even seen that Blood Knight come in and get its effect off, become a 6/6 just off his own Annoyotron. Maybe that can come in handy later in this tournament if a Paladin does kind of pop up, but for now, it's going to be kind of hard to see that tech choice come in. We'll have to see if the Fel Reavers can really get the job done.
Right, so before we hop into this match, we want to give a shout out to Blizzard, Twitch, and ESL for helping to make this possible, as well as give another shout out to Amazon, who is running a promotion right now. If you head on over to amazon.com/Hearthstone, you can purchase coin packs for 10% basically rebate, which will allow you to purchase more packs through there at greatly discounted prices.
Yeah, you get 87 packs for just $90, so just over $1 a pack. Pretty cheap price.
Right, so obviously if you haven't gotten a chance to pick up some packs from the Grand Tournament yet, this is definitely a really value-laden way to do so. But I think we're almost ready to hop into this next match here. So we mentioned Amaz's Mech Mage now. It's not necessarily as streamlined as some of the other Mech Mage decks we've necessarily seen on ladder. That said, he did finish very highly with it. So obviously there's kind of a method to his madness as it goes. Yeah,
Mage and Druid are two of the classes that, Amaz has really finished on ladder with multiple times, so that's kind of his bread and butter. Adding the Warlock as his third deck, the Demon Handlock has been a really popular choice in this tournament, offering a pretty good solution to the Patron-filled metagame, also boasting a pretty solid matchup against Druid.
Yeah, I would also want to say that the Demon Handlock just across the board is one of those decks where, if you get in trouble against maybe something like if you're expecting more Hunters, if you're expecting more Paladins, there are a lot of ways to stabilize with that deck because of, the synergy between Molten Giants, stuff like Healbot, and even Mal'Ganis coming off of Void Caller. So definitely a very popular deck this tournament. We'll have to see what Amaz chooses to open with. If he goes with that Mage route, he has pretty solid lineups, I feel like, across most of these matchups that Allandang is running. Mech Mage is definitely one of those decks that can just kind of get on top of Patron, as we saw, and just kind of keep, bursting them down. So
yeah, looking at Druid, Warrior, and Warlock as being the main classes in this tournament, Mech Mage does, and just Mage in general, seems to be a pretty strong choice. It does really well against Druid, fairly well against Warlock, and we've seen it do really well against Patron, not only today, but in the rest of the tournament.
Yeah, we did see Dog earlier, start out with his Mage against Firebat's Patron Warrior, took a win there, and then Firebat kind of turned the tables on him and brought out his own Tempo Mage and beat Patron Warrior. So I wouldn't necessarily say, given the nature of Patron Warrior, that it's any kind of direct counter, but if you can kind of get those early drops and get Frostbolts to the face to deny weapons, or you can possibly even look at getting Mirror Images, again, to deny the weapon charges, it really allows you to kind of steamroll out of control. And the Patron Warrior, by nature of being a combo deck, requires that time to draw those pieces, kind of have that Emperor Thaurissan, somewhere around like turn 6 to 7, and really get those discounted pieces, or else it falls way too far behind.
Yeah, the Mage decks, whether it's Tempo or Mech, just do lay on a lot of pressure early game. Amaz might be looking to curb into Piloted Shredder, Fel Reaver, and then we've also seen Dr. Boom in his list, might have Archmage Antonidas in there as well. Just a lot of late game to supplement that early game that cards like Mech Warper provide him.
Right, we've even seen, I believe Firebat was running Ronin in his version of the deck. I don't know if Amaz is running that, but it kind of shows you that these players are also thinking, what can I do later in the game to try to, possibly beat out stuff like Patron and Handlock? Because Tempo Mage, kind of by design, tends to run out of steam if it can't get into that Archmage Antonidas, or it can't get a Toshli or a Ronin. So interesting. I don't think we've fully seen Amaz's actual deck list. So
yeah, we've seen a lot of it thanks to the Fel Reaver effect. He's been discarding cards left and right in his matches, so I mean, it's not going to be too many surprises left in that deck, but yeah, we haven't seen the entire list. It is kind of interesting to note, like you said, going back to it, aggro decks have had to change since the Grand Tournament cards, as well as just Blackrock Mountain came out. A lot of more defensive decks in the meta. You can't just do what old like Aggro Hunter did. I mean, I played an Aggro Hunter that curved out to 3 earlier in a tournament this year. You can't really do that now. You need to include more of those later drops. Piloted Shredder, Lotheb, very common inclusions, and then curve out to things like Dr. Boom and have more of a solid late game.
Yeah, we've kind of seen the, as you brought up Face Hunter, those kind of decks specifically that kind of rely on just jamming down the board with very small mana-efficient minions have kind of run into trouble because of the popularity of stuff like Patron, where, you have an unstable ghoul. Druid has a lot of taunts in it. Mages have the ability to, put down mirror images, and that gives them a lot of problems, and that may be why we haven't actually seen any direct aggro decks in this tournament.
Yeah, we actually haven't seen any Zoo, any Face Hunter, so I mean, people kind of criticized the Grand Tournament a bit, saying it didn't really spawn any Patron-esque archetypes, but it has definitely shaped the meta in a different way, and it has actually slowed down the meta just by looking at the deck archetypes.
Yeah, and so when we look at kind of what players were deciding to bring, if you were, obviously, you didn't make it out of the last qualifier, but if you had, what kind of, would you have changed up your deck list that much, or?
Well, I'm not a huge fan of Druids, so I tend not to include that in my lineup. That's something a lot of players tend to like. I do agree with the Patron being really strong. I really like Warlock variants. I was actually a fan of the Malagos Warlock, which we actually see right here in this matchup from Allandang. He's succeeding with it in this tournament. I'll be playing it right in this game 1, but it's a deck I think is heavily underrated and does really well in the meta. And then as my third deck, I think that's where a lot of consideration comes in for me. I actually do like mid-range Paladin quite a bit. All 4 players that qualified for BlizzCon out of China were running a form of mid-range Paladin, so I'm a bit surprised to see it take a bit of a backseat in the North American qualifiers.
Right. Well, we see Amaz chooses to open with Druid. He does have that early game innervate, which is something that will allow him to do something like put out a turn 1 Savage Combatant, which would do a really good job of contesting this Zombie Chow Allandang has put out. That said, he chooses to go ahead and hold on to it since he wouldn't be able to hero power immediately, I imagine. Acidic Swamp Ooze just comes out as a tempo 3-2. We pointed out that Nias was running, a lot of anti-weapon tech cards here. And it looks like Allandang kind of has the same thing in mind. He doesn't really want to give weapons as much value as they normally generate.
Yeah, Ooze is a pretty common inclusion. Instead of that Harrison Jones we normally see in the Warlock variants, the slower ones, because it's just a lot easier to squeeze into your curve with those life taps, with the mid game that you're presenting. And with life tap, your hand is often very full anyway, so you don't need to draw the cards off of the weapon destruction.
Right, so we see Amaz, he spends the turn wrathing, getting rid of that Acidic Swamp Ooze as opposed to playing his own thing, which makes sense. He doesn't, obviously 3-2 is a stat line that contests a lot of things. Do you expect him maybe on this turn to consider something like Piloted Shredder or going straight for a Lotheb?
Well, the Piloted Shredder runs into a small problem of if Allandang has Defender of Argus, which is normally, it's just a 1-of normally in this deck, so he's going to go for a much more proactive play and just do something that accomplishes a removal immediately. And it's not really weak to anything here. Defender of Argus can't punish this. Dark Bomb would only trade, 2 for 1 essentially, 2 for 2 if you consider the Innervate being used by Amaz. So he's just going to get rid of that Zombie Chow immediately.
Yeah, and we've talked about a little bit over the past few days that Savage Combatant has been appearing in more and more Druid lists. Both Firebat and Amaz, Archon players, have elected to run it. We kind of see why right here. As you pointed out, he was able to coin it out and then use that Innervate to just immediately get rid of the Zombie Chow. And yeah, Imp Gangmaster, obviously very strong card in its own right, but in this situation, not really going to do much to contest that giant bear.
Yeah, Imp Gang Boss, much more effective against the more aggressive decks, the more low-curving decks. Might do a little bit of work to remove things like that Darnassus Aspirant in Amaz's hand, but for now, probably just going to be pointed at the face. And it's interesting how these Warlock decks are played out by life tapping so much, but against Druid, it really changes up your game plan, and you just want to play as much stuff onto the board as you can, even going for things like 4-4 Twilight Drakes. Normally you might see that at a 4-9 or a 4-10 by this turn, but much weaker because Allandang hasn't been able to life tap. He's just had to keep playing things on board to keep up with Amaz's aggressive opening.
Yeah, and we see the rest of Allandang's hand is, as you pointed out, very small for a Warlock. Normally by this point they would have, something like 7, 8, even 9 cards in hand. And Allandang is trying a different approach to playing Druid. He doesn't want to let the Druid just have an uncontested board and start developing into that combo. So he's throwing down his own stuff. Twilight Drake at 4/4 is probably the smallest Twilight Drake I've seen probably in months. We see the rest of his hand. He has a Zerdrake for turn 5, but the rest of his hand is definitely targeted more towards kind of that later game win condition with Dr. Boom and Malygos.
Yeah, and the Malygos win condition it's almost become like a supplemental thing to this deck. It's really not too much of a combo deck, as we can see right here. It plays almost functionally like a mid-range deck with the dragon cards that this year's sets have brought us. We have the Blackwing Corruptor, basically a miniature Fire Elemental, and also the new Twilight Guardian functioning as like a better Senjin Shieldmaster. This deck can play very much like a mid-range deck, but then in certain matchups, wow, Millhouse Manastorm, a huge drop, going to contest Imp Gang Boss.
Have you ever seen a Golden Millhouse Manastorm?
Off Shredders, yeah.
I have actually never seen
just,
one.
Never just legitimately in someone's deck.
I'm just seeing the animations for the first time. I like it. He is the master of magic's Millhouse Manastorm.
Yeah, and just quickly going back to what I was saying, basically the Malygos has become almost just an addition if you need it. It's very rarely something that outright wins you the game. Like in this game, you could see something like maybe turn 10, just Malygos Mortal Coil. That's a 6 damage removal, puts a 4/12 onto the board, and can help just, again, contest what the Druid's doing.
Right, so as I mentioned, Amaz does get that Millhouse Manastorm, which is, I'm pretty sure, actually just the best thing you can get.
Yeah, pretty ridiculous drop, especially when you're facing down a 2/4. It's going to be dealt with, but Allandang would much rather save Immortal Coil or use it on a different target.
Right, and he manages to get rid of Millhouse, who obviously has a very long death sound, actually. Not too familiar with Millhouses, you don't see him much, but Allandang has to leave up that 4/6 bear, which can feel good, especially since the Druid of the Claw contests the Blackwing Corruptor very efficiently. Allows him to still look at doing more trades, possibly with that Imp Gang Boss, depending how his board sits. Now, for Amaz, we look at his hand. He actually doesn't have just a flat 6 mana minion to play from hand, so he kind of has to consider options. He could play Lotheb, he could play a Zerdrake. If he wants to, he could go for Darnassus Aspirant, although since there's really nothing in his hand that kind of, there's no combo pieces, there's nothing he's necessarily trying to build into, you have to figure he's either going to go for Lotheb or a Zerdrake here.
Yeah, and I feel like Azdrake might be the preferred option, mainly because Lotheb really isn't blocking anything out going into a turn 7 for Allandang. But Amaz is actually going to just prefer the better stats here. Decides he doesn't really need to draw in anything. He's probably going to be drawing next turn with the Ancient Allure anyway, so just going to go with that. And if there were to be a second Mortal Coil, which there is right off the top, so Amaz does get a little rewarded for playing around that second Mortal Coil, but I would expect Allandang to just go for the Dr. Boom right on curve, right on 7.
Yeah, obviously Imp Gang Boss into the 4/1 does not feel good at all, but, a visit to the doctor might make him feel a little bit better here, so.
Yep. As long as Allandang's ahead on this board and he's staying out of that combo range, he can really look to move ahead in the game. It's actually pretty nice he picked up that second Mortal Coil because, again, if he can't find a use for that by turn 10, Malygos Mortal Coil will basically remove any minion that the Druid can play.
And he'd get to draw a card from it.
Ooh.
I know, right? Upside. Nothing but upside. Malygos is kind of one of those minions. I remember back in the day I was using Malygos Shaman when Karin was super popular. And so the play was turn 10 Malygos Earthshock. It feels really nice when you can use those 1-mana spells and just do crazy stuff with
and Big Game Hunter here, generally this Malygos Warlock deck is playing 2 Big Game Hunters to make its matchup against Handlock, which is a popular deck in this tournament, even better. But also teching in 1 Abusive Sergeant lets it use Big Game Hunter on these mid-range threats that Druid presents. So he's going to remove one of these 5/5s for free, and he could even trade into the other one, maybe with the 1/1s, maybe just with Dr. Boom.
That said, looking at the Allandang's board, he has a couple of minions here that have 1 health. Wow.
First Boombot, kind of revenge for the Millhouse Manastorm drop.
Everybody has a time to shine. That Boombot's time was right there.
Yeah, now Allandang is super far ahead on the board. Amaz has a Big Game Hunter nowhere in his hand, so needs to find something like that to get rid of that Dr. Boom and really start coming back on this board. Allandang is slightly out of combo range, so Amaz can't really, crutch on that. And Allandang also has the heal bot, so moving forward, Allandang has pretty much complete control of this game, and Amaz is going to have to find a way to change that.
Yeah, I was mentioning there a little bit that, you have 3 minions on Allandang's board that have 1 health, which obviously kind of says, like, Swipe might be an okay pick, but again, it's not like you'd get too much out of it. You can't get rid of that Dr. Boom with the Swipe. You can get rid of the Big Game Hunter, but again, it doesn't really solve the problem of the 7/7 just hitting you in the face. And yeah, Maz is, plays down the Azure Drake. This is more in line of the gotta find something Drake as opposed to the wanna combo with Spell Power Drake, which is usually what you want to be doing. We also look in his hand. He drew those 2 Wild Growths kind of long after they were relevant to what he wanted to do. So they're just kind of sitting there. And next turn, he can use them to cycle. But again, those cost 2 mana, and it might not actually play into him surviving.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like that Azure Drake from Amaz was kind of well, I think I need to draw a Big Game Hunter to this very next draw, and he did not pick it up.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of times in this tournament now. Druid, obviously, when it gets that Savage Roar and when it gets the combo right when it needs to, obviously capable of very dominating victories, but we've seen it a couple times now where the Druid hand is just kind of bloated with, mana acceleration cards, combo pieces, and nothing really that allows them to wrestle the board back. Obviously, Druid has the ability to accelerate into Druid time like we were talking about yesterday, but kind of once they get there, they're actually more of an honest class in that they can't really just, they have no quality Consecrate, they have no Shadow Flame, they have no crazy board clears. It's just swipe and trying to maintain the board, basically.
I'm a little surprised Allandang didn't check the Boombot there, because there was just kind of close to about a 20% chance that if it hit face for the right amount of damage, he could have just pushed all face and ended the game there. Decides to throw out that Mortal Coil, so he's not going to have that option with the Malios, but he's obviously in such a dominant position that that's not even a concern for him right now.
Right, so Amaz goes ahead and throws down the Darnassus Aspirant, plays the first Wild Growth. He's going to cycle to see what he can find. Finds another Drake, which not great right now. And
yeah, and at this point, even if he finds that Big Game Hunter, he's still dead to exactly what is on Allandang's board.
Yeah, so looks like, Amaz is going to go ahead and concede this one, which is going to allow Allandang to take game 1. And, it's one of those situations where, despite the fact that Druid was pressuring early, Allandang managed to turn around and, ultimately claim the game.
Yeah, I think it really goes back a lot to that early game where Allandang, even if it wasn't efficient minions he was played that Ooze on 2, played Imp-Gang Boss, which didn't really do too much, but just played out that 4/4 Twilight Drake. He was just playing whatever he could, knowing that if he could get to a big swing turn with that Blackwing Corruptor, basically serving as a Fire Elemental with the Mortal Coil as well, and then curve into Dr. Boom, it wasn't answered, and from then on, he just took over that board.
Yeah, when we looked at Allandang's early hand, it was obvious he had a lot of the more late-game oriented cards that he would be looking for in his deck, and for him, it was just kind of a matter of could he stabilize the board without getting comboed and kind of make it to that late game, and he did. The Dr. Boom came out, was obviously never contested, and, that ultimately is what spelled Amaz losing that first game.
Yep. Even with a pretty fortunate Shredder drop, Allandang managed to find those swing turns, stick the Dr. Boom, and the Boombot came back to bite Amaz, hitting for 4, and instantly removing an Azure Drake.
I think that's the second time now that, when I've been casting anyway, I've seen Millhouse Manastorm come off the Shredder. I think both times the player who's gotten it has actually lost.
Yeah?
Just goes to show you, Millhouse Manastorm, no guarantee of victory.
I think Millhouse Manastorm overall, his win rate's quite low, actually.
Well, yeah, that's fair. I think we did see Firebat just play a Millhouse Manastorm off an unstable portal earlier in the
Yeah, that didn't pan out.
Usually doesn't.
No.
Millhouse Manastorm, a little bit of a cursed minion, but we see here Allandang going to switch to Warrior. Amaz is going to stay on Druid. And Allandang is also one of those people who brought Brawl as a tech card in his Patron deck. Kind of, I would imagine mostly in consideration of the Mirror versus other Patron decks, but there are obviously other uses, as we saw, when Muzzy played his own Brawl.
Yeah, the Brawl does kind of help you if you get into one of those situations where you're so far behind, your opponent has 3 minions or more on board, they're all Patron resilient, and it creates this unique situation where Brawl is basically the only card that would do it. Obviously, it does involve a bit of luck in what ends up coming out, so you have to be prepared for worst case sometimes, like we saw last game with Muzzy.
Yeah, that unfortunately was not exactly what Muzzy wanted in his own Brawl. Maz's opening hand, he has the Wild Growth, which is good, but the rest of his hand is not going to be really great for the first few turns. And as we've discussed over the course of this qualifier tournament, Druid really needs to be the aggressor in this matchup. They need to be playing minions, forcing the Patron Warrior to have the Death Bite, have the early Fiery War Axe. Don't just allow them to sit there and cycle. And Allandang just throws out an Unstable Ghoul. Again, just a little stop sign in case something more aggressive comes out for Amaz. Amaz draws the Savage Combatant, which is great timing. Very much wanted that. Now he's going to curve out pretty nicely for the rest of his early turns.
Yeah, if Amaz missed that turn, Allandang would be in a much better spot, knowing that he's just that much more mana ahead before the Druid really starts abusing that wild growth mana ramp. Right now, you know, he doesn't really have a great answer to the Savage Combatant, and it threatens to hero power, though I imagine Amaz would rather just play a 5-drop. Of course, Allandang doesn't know that Amaz's hand is just full of 5s, and he's just kind of going to have to go with what he thinks is best. Might end up just being that Acolyte. Try and draw into those answers for later.
Right, sometimes when you're in a situation where you can't necessarily do what you want with the board, you just try to ensure you get the most value, and that's what that Acolyte of Pain represents. He doesn't have the ability. He was only on his turn 3. Obviously, it's kind of a tell to Amaz that Death Spite didn't come out, because Amaz is obviously keeping track of the fact that Allandang had the coin.
Yeah.
So since it didn't come out, it's a pretty clear tell to Amaz that he doesn't have the Death Spite, and we see Druid of the Claw come out, and yeah, Amaz has that pretty early board lead, and I'm kind of curious if next turn, assuming he doesn't draw anything better, you know, Azure Drake, Lotheb. Obviously, Azure Drake, you know, great spell power, you draw a card, but Lotheb allows you to lock Patron out a lot of their stuff, and since you haven't seen a Death Spite, maybe you're considering that hand is mostly just spells.
Right now, Allandang, with that Execute pickup, actually has a pretty good play at his disposal. Unfortunately, he isn't damaged, so he can't really abuse Battle Rage, but Whirlwind into Execute, and then he can trade in his Acolyte, removing the entire board from Amaz, picking up some extra cards with that Acolyte, so ends up being pretty worthy investment, and we'll have to see how he spends his last 2 mana on this turn.
Right. He could play down an Armor Smith, which is, you know, just something that can test something that comes down from Amaz. Could just armor up. I want to say, yeah, with the coin, he could actually go up to 3 mana if he wants the shield block, which would allow him to cycle a little more. He could even just play down the Unstable Ghoul. So Allandang has a lot of options, and you know, obviously, what just happened very much alters what Amaz's next play is going to be. You know, I was talking about the possibility of Lotheb even coming down as like a way to seal the game, but Amaz is actually just kind of back to square one right now.
Yeah, and Allandang's still at 30, so Amaz has not been able to push through any damage despite having the initiative. The Unstable Ghoul stopping it, and then the Execute being able to remove Amaz's next threat. Still going to go with that Lotheb. Again, we've seen Amaz do this time and time again. He values the extra power over the card draw. Obviously, spell power wouldn't come in handy right now, and this will cost him the Lotheb effect later in the game, but I think one thing he was really worried about here was maybe just a big Patron play with Inner Rage, maybe even a Whirlwind. Obviously, Allandang doesn't have Patrons, but definitely something Amaz could have seen happening and decides to try to avoid.
Right, and next turn, Amaz will have access to Ancient of Lore, so he can go about looking for the other part of his combo. He can try to find some more stuff to put that pressure on Allandang, but as you pointed out, Amaz no longer has access to the Lotheb effect, which later on down the road could possibly be, you know, a source of bad times for him.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a pretty solid Lotheb. It's going to force Allandang to do something that he probably wouldn't do otherwise. I think if he wasn't Lotheb, he might just go for that shield block, cycle further towards the Grim Patrons, but this way he's actually just going to have to throw out one of the War Songs. He obviously has that second one to back it up, so not a huge ordeal. And for Amaz, he doesn't have a way to remove it, so he's thinking he might get punished.
Yeah, Unstable Ghoul has kind of been one of the quiet MVPs of this deck throughout the tournament. Just, you know, stalling out enemy plays, being a good source, obviously, of activating, you know, Frothing Berserker, Grim Patrons.
Yeah.
It's one of those cards that's just annoying, and it's not necessarily big enough to where you feel, you know, even if Amaz had the Keeper of the Grove, that you want to silence it. Maybe you want to save that for something else. Maybe you want to save the Keeper of the Grove to do 2 damage. But it's obviously doing work throughout this tournament. And now Amaz is in a situation where he draws Innervade, and it doesn't seem immediately impactful. And I'd be curious to see, you know, if he just goes for that Ancient of Lore to draw some cards.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that does look like the play he would go for. Looks like he's going to Azure Drake, kind of dig to see if he could find an answer to that War Song. I feel like he might be a little more afraid of that than... Not than he should be. Oh, well, yeah, he's really afraid of it. He's going to even innervate out Savage Roar just to get rid of it. Doesn't find a very efficient answer. Says, all right, I guess I'll have to do this. I am not letting you charge out Grim Patrons.
Yeah, that's... Obviously, War Song Commander... It's a very strong card in that it allows most minions out of the Patron deck to charge, and it's just something you can't leave unchecked. You know, if you do, there's a chance you just lose outright. So, as you pointed out, Amaz forced into a situation where he doesn't get to make necessarily the most efficient play, or even pursue his own line he wants to go. It's just, you can't have War Song Commander alive. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and a Deathspite pickup, pretty nice for Allandang. Finally gets to start giving these 2-for-1s with weapons, which is really the strength of it. Especially when you're at such a high life total, like 39. You can use those weapons with impunity. You really don't care that you're taking damage back to your hero. And just keep getting 2-for-1s. We can already see Amaz is really low on cards due to the mana ramping abilities of Druid.
Yeah, there's a danger in druiding too hard, which, you know, thing is, Amaz really didn't even go that route. It wasn't like he played a lot of mana acceleration early. He just had to use a lot of cards, as we talked about, in a way that he might not necessarily want to. He draws Swipe, but he's decided it's time to just go ahead and draw some cards. He needs to, I think he realizes he needs to start finding answers quickly.
Yeah, and Allandang basically, since he knows one Savage Roar is out and one Innervate's out, a lot of the threatening combinations Druid can do, especially when you're already at 36 health, going to like turn 7. He's in a really safe spot, he feels. He has a bunch of time. Picks up the first Patron. He's got Inner-Rage as well. He can't kill off everything, but he can get a pretty solid Battle Rage here.
Yeah, not only does he get that big Battle Rage, but he sets up the board in a way that, as this tournament has proven, is just very difficult for Druid to deal with. Like, they can kind of try to battle back, but, you know, it's one of those things where, depending upon how the board ultimately ends up being...
Well, Amaz can definitely answer it.
Right.
Since he has that Innervate and he has a lot of tools like Force of Nature, like Swipe. And the main thing being Amaz also just has a 5-1 left, so that's going to kill off a fresh Patron and really set up. He can even just Keeper of the Grove Swipe, and that's going to get rid of all the Patrons. So Allandang's going to have to move forward 1 Patron, 1 Warsong down. The solace for him being that Amaz has used a lot of cards. He's been through an Ancient Allure. He's been through 1/2 of the combo. You know, a lot of stuff's out of the way. And we can see, even looking at Amaz's hand, it's really not that powerful.
Yeah, so Allandang got to draw a reasonable number of cards off that Battle Cry, or that Battle Rage. He got to cycle through his deck some more, and then he does find Emperor Thor's hand, which his hand at the moment isn't necessarily super advantageous with Emperor Thor's hand, but again, Amaz doesn't know that, and he is technically getting value out of it.
Yeah, it's more about the 5/5 body here, I think, and also just the mana reductions will let him do more things with his turn, be more flexible with his mana going forward. You never know when you're going to use that Battle Rage, draw into more cards, and need that mana. But mainly, it's also just another threat. Like you said, Amaz doesn't know that it's not important. He might feel threatened enough to just start comboing off, clearing out, and it might get to that situation where we get into a very attrition-based battle here, where both players are running extremely low on resources and still need to find a way to win.
Right, and we see that Amaz goes ahead and puts out that Force of Nature. So, you know, as you said, he's kind of decided this is a threatening enough situation where he has to clear the board, and, you know, completely understandable line of play, but this is kind of diminishing the total amount of resources he can bring in the future. We see Allandang still has that Brawl in hand too, so Amaz can try to start putting down stuff like that Piloted Shredder and building a board, but Allandang kind of has a little bit of an insurance policy in that Brawl to be able to just kind of clear most of the board away. Oh, and a Loot Hoarder in Allandang's.
Yep, so he's just going to get a little bit of cycling. A card we don't see too often. Usually the Gnomish Inventor is used in favor of it since it's a more sturdy body. Gets that card immediately. But Loot Hoarder should get the job done, just a little delayed. Probably won't get silenced unless Amaz draws that second Keeper of the Grove. He can start getting that axe down, clearing off minions, and both players at very reasonable health totals, so it's again just going to come down to this long, drawn-out fight of whoever kind of gets the last stick on the board.
Right, and we see that Amaz does have Savage Roar in hand, so if he can get Force of Nature, obviously he can threaten a lot of damage, especially if he can keep something like that Paladin Shredder on the board. But we'll see Allandang elects to go ahead and get rid of the injured Keeper of the Grove, and then he plays the Loot Hoarder, which I think the first time I've ever seen Loot Hoarder. Well, no, it's not the Freeze Mage used to run Loot Hoarder, right?
Yeah, Freeze Mage tends to run Loot Hoarders even today. For Amaz, one of the few of the best draws in his deck right now. I believe he's been through the Azure Drakes, so really looking for maybe second Ancient Allure, Dr. Boom, just bigger stuff to put on the board. Of course, Allandang, like we've talked about, still has that Brawl as a last chance defense, but Amaz is going to need to draw into better minions, I think, to seal out this game than these small ones he's getting.
Yeah, Shade of Naxxramas obviously has the potential to become really, really powerful later. Allandang, though, you know, it's not super hard to remove this Shade of Naxxramas in its current form as a 2/2. Allandang's hand doesn't have the ability to do so, but I kind of wonder if that was a consideration. Amaz kind of paused there, and he wasn't necessarily sure what he wanted to play.
Yeah,
I wonder.
Definitely thinking about playing that Darknassus Aspirant would be a little weaker to the Brawl, would probably prompt it out from Allandang.
Right. You see only one card in Amaz's hand, and you can kind of guess what it might be.
Yeah, well, you can kind of narrow it down to, okay, he hero powered last turn, so that means he used 2 mana without wanting to use on anything else. He played a weak minion, so it's probably not a 5-drop. If it was a 7-drop, he probably would have just played it instead of shading. So what is it? It's a spell. What spell? He probably doesn't know for sure, but he can kind of narrow down the possibilities and land on maybe a piece of the combo. Maybe if it was a Wild Growth, he might have cycled it. Both Innervates are out. Maybe it's a Wrath, maybe a Swipe.
Right. We see Allandang, just kind of considering what he wants to. It looks like he wants to consider slamming his own Gnomish Inventor, which would allow him to draw a card. Kind of curious. So this isn't necessarily something I'm super aware of, but why would you consider slamming your own minion over something like the Paladin Shredder? Oh, the Battle Rage. Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely the Battle Rage. And he's really just trying to cycle towards cards like Acolyte of Pain to cycle even further towards just ending this game. He can get Whirlwind effects and maybe just end the game in the coming turns with Frothing Berserker. He gets to exactly a Whirlwind effect, and now we're getting to the point where maybe Allandang can close out this game.
All right, so we see Amaz gets an Azure Drake off the top. With the minions he has on the board, if he had gotten Force of Nature there, would that have been lethal?
Would have been 25, yeah.
Yeah, so it would have been exact lethal. So we see here, his Azure Drake is going to come down. He's still digging, presumably, for that Force of Nature. Druid of the Claw, though.
Yeah.
Wow, if he had a little more mana, yeah.
Yeah, he could hold on to that to use it in combination with the Savage Roar to push out as much damage as possible. Could just throw it out now, maybe charge it, maybe taunt it. He's just kind of looking for a situation where he can end this game pretty soon. On the other side of the coin, for Allandang, next turn he can be charging out a Frothing Berserker and a Cruel Taskmaster. Whirlwinding on potentially 8 targets, but it looks like Amaz will trade so that doesn't happen.
Right, obviously, at this point, as someone at this level of play, you understand that having more minions on the board is actually just a boon to the patron. Oh, wow.
Second Frothing.
Yeah.
But a taunt comes down, so I think we're just going to see a Brawl out this turn.
I was going to say, with what's in Allandang's hand, a Brawl seems pretty favorable. He's already, he's already thumbing over it. Like he just wants to get some of these minions off the board. Obviously, he's aiming for that 4/6. He really wants that off the board.
Yeah.
Anything else that stays isn't necessarily super threatening to him. And in fact, may serve to boost his Frothing Berserkers.
Yeah, really doesn't care too much about the other two, and the Azure Drake is the one that survives. Not a taunt, not a heal, but comes down, so not a problem.
Curious to see if he just goes face with this Death Spider.
If he armors up, he won't be dead to the combo with this damage on board, so could go face, could kill off the Azure Drake again. We kind of talked about how that's going to give him more damage next turn, so
right,
would make sense to maybe just swing for the fences here.
Yeah.
Set up that double Frothing kill next turn.
And while it certainly telegraphs to Amaz that, that's what you're looking to do next turn, it's not as if Amaz has a handful of cards, right? He's really kind of at the mercy of what his next draw is.
Yeah. Well, if he charges out both the Frothings, he will have 2 Whirlwind effects, so I think maybe there was a case to be made for just killing off the Drake. That opens up the kind of draw them out and stall this game out, run him out of stuff plan, but it also probably still sets you up in a lethal territory for next turn.
Right, we see Amaz gets Wrath, and Wrath, obviously not super useful in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can Wrath off your 3/2 if you really think that's going to save you. Maybe that's something he's considering since he saw Allandang doing math and deciding, I'm not going to kill your minion.
Let's see what Wild Growth gives him. But yeah, that Wrath just used to get rid of the Undercity Valiant, which I feel like I've actually seen a fair bit from lately off of Shredders. So he does draw into the combo, but looks like it might be too little too late.
For him. 2 Whirlwind effects will seal out this game. Allandang almost drunk through his entire deck. Surely lethal here. He can kind of decide how he wants to do it. 2 Whirlwind effects on 4 minions would be 16 from the Frothing effects, 4 from the weapon, and 4 from the Frothing, so a total of 24 damage. He's going to opt to go with Grim Patrons instead. Maybe easier math for him.
Right, so yeah, Amaz early on, he did a good job of kind of getting those big early game, well, not big, but more like medium-sized Druid creatures out. But Allandang had answers, despite the fact that the majority of his hand was spells.
Yep, so Amaz was able to answer that first wave of patrons, but ultimately it cost him too many resources, and the second wave of patrons at the very end of the game gets the job done.
Yeah, so Allandang is going to go up 2-0 now on Amaz, and all Allandang has, I believe, left is his Druid. So, you know, and we talked about this yesterday, you know, he has to win 1 game out of 3 as a Druid, you know, certainly doable. Whereas Amaz kind of has to figure out now that he knows it's Druid, how he wants to address that. Obviously, he has Mage.
Might start with the Mech Mage.
Right.
Yeah, definitely a good matchup there. I believe we did see Amaz 3-0, a Druid, to stay alive in this tournament. He was in this exact situation, led out with that Mech Mage, and, you know, kept his dreams alive. So maybe it can happen again. He definitely has a lineup capable of doing that with the Mirror Match, the Mech Mage deck, and also that Demon Handlock. But, I mean, you definitely have to favor Allandang in this spot.
Right. The ability for Druid to just kind of ramp out those big cards early and get ahead by functioning on Druid time is one of those things where, that's why we said yesterday, it's totally possible to see a world where in 3 games, Druid gets 1 win. I like Amaz starting out with the Mage deck here. I do think that it probably gives him his best odds, at least in my opinion. I don't know that you necessarily want to go straight to the Druid mirror. And Handlock obviously runs into situations where Druid can get out those quick burst damage turns around like turn 7, 8, and 9 and just end the game. So I feel like if I were him, I would probably start out with that Mech Mage, but you know, obviously it's all about what Amaz feels most comfortable with going into this.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, an elimination match for this regional qualifier, so if Amaz falls here, it's all over for him. He's going to start out with a Druid Mirror, try and start mounting this comeback.
Right. Looking at his hand for the opening, he has Innervate, Wild Growth, Keeper of the Grove, and Force of Nature. He can send back Force of Nature if he wants. Curious to see if he keeps Keeper of the Grove. No, he goes ahead and gets rid of that. Allandang's hand after the mulligan is pretty unwieldy.
Yeah, and Amaz's hand is pretty solid. I mean, he's got 3 sources of mana ramp. He's going to have the Savage Combatant at least for an early minion, whereas Allandang has no early minions.
Right. It's kind of crazy to look at your hand and think, okay, I have Innervate, and realize you're still 3 or 4 turns away from a play.
Yeah.
Because you got both of those Ancient of Lore. That said, if Allandang can survive to that point, if he gets some draws that allow him to contest the early game board, he will have access to a lot of card draw, but he chooses to pass. Obviously, nothing really he could do there except Innervate Hero Power.
Yeah, now for Amaz, he actually has a lot of options. Basically has 3 different ways to go about this. He can go super aggro, just put out the 5-4 on turn 1, and then go for the ramping. Or he can just start the ramping early. I think I'd like to see him just put out the 5-4. It's not really weak to anything from the Druid side of the field. But he's going to start off with Wild Growth, maybe looking to innervate into Druid of the Claw next turn and then go for the Savage Combatant, protected maybe by the Druid of the Claw taunt.
Wow, so he goes ahead and he innervates out that Darnassus Aspirant too, so...
Right.
He will go straight into Savage Combatant next turn, and then he would still be able to curve out the Druid of the Claw.
If there's no Wrath, which there isn't, so... I mean, I think that's the only issue I had with this play is that it is vulnerable to a Wrath kind of ruining your day, and then you do nothing.
Right.
Luckily for him, Allandang's hand is just... It just got nothing going right now.
I was going to say, this may be one of the worst Druid opening hands I think I've seen in all of Hearthstone. It's just 7, 7, 6, and 7 and then an Innervate. So, as I said, it's going to be a while before Allandang gets into this one. Amaz goes ahead, he unleashes the Beast, and Shade Max Damage comes out right on time. So Allandang does at least have a turn 3 play.
Yeah, I'm a little interested to see if Amaz maybe kind of senses weakness here and just charges a Druid. Obviously kind of the safer play. And the more common play you'll see in the Druid Mirror is just taunt it up, challenges that Shade really well, make sure it really can't pop out for a long time, and he is going to go with that. So.
Right, and we're still, let's see what Allandang draws here, but so he gets, yep, Darnassus Aspirant, which, you know, it's, he could play, actually, he could innervate right into Force of Nature to get the Druid of the Claw up, and he may feel he has to do that based on how much is on the board right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you pass, basically just by doing nothing, you have to look at how much damage you're taking. That's 11 on the board, 3 from the hero power from us. Just use that. You're at 8. You're just dead next turn. So he can save the Innervate to get out a 7-drop, but then he won't have time to play the 7-drop. So he needs to act now.
Right. This is pretty reasonable. He gets the 4/6 off the board. He gets rid of the Darnassus Aspirant, and you know now it's just 1 minion apiece per player. But obviously, Allandang Shade can just be removed with a hero power. It can be removed with a Wrath, Keeper of the Grove. Amaz has that Keeper of the Grove, but he also has a couple of other options for his turn.
Yeah, definitely. He has basically, I would say 2 pretty good options. I don't think he'll go for the keeper, considering that Hero Power Shade pretty much accomplishes the same thing and develops a theoretically better minion. Druid of the Claw, though, gets you the most development, but then leaves up that Shade. You don't really want to run your Savage Combatant into it, so I suspect it'll probably be that Shade Hero Power here. That is going to be his choice. And so Amaz basically has the initiative, he has the health lead, and Allandang maybe is looking to top deck something like second Innervate here just to get back into this game.
Right, by innervating out that Force of Nature last turn, you know, we talked about the fact that it was important that he cleared off that 4/6 and as well as the Darnassus Aspirant, but, you know, until he drew this Druid of the Claw, he's basically, this is it, I'm not going to be able to accelerate right to turn 7 and play that Ancient of Lore, so at least now he gets that Druid of the Claw. He kind of has to figure out exactly what he wants to do with it. Druid of the Claw seems safer to me. You know, will contest the Savage Combatant unless Amaz chooses to go the Hero Power Shade route. So, meanwhile, Amaz, pretty reasonable hand. No organic turn 6 play, but he has a Druid of the Claw. He has a Loatheb. He can even silence if he just wants to push for damage. Obviously, he can silence and then Hero Power, which doesn't feel too bad to me.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a consideration here. I mean, you can clear off the Druid of the Claw pretty easily by using your Hero Power along with the Shade, but then really all you can do is Keeper and damage face, so I mean, silencing it and pushing face for 11 when you have the Druid of the Claw in your back pocket, you know you have at least 4 damage. You put 3 minions on the board, like really what can your opponent do on 6 mana? And that's what he's gonna go for. Wouldn't be surprised to see the Shade on stealth either. It's at least 8 pushing face, maybe 11.
Yeah, he's going right for it. And Amaz, you talked a little bit earlier about Amaz possibly being able to sense the fact that Allandang was in a bad spot, and I think he's fully made that read now. Allandang does get Ancient of War, but it's just
doesn't have enough mana. Yep, so that's
turn too early here for that. So
that's gonna be it with the Druid of the Claw. Of course, he is technically no, he's not alive on board because that Shade's gonna grow. So dead to board, unfortunately for Allandang. Really, the draws didn't go his way, and Amaz was able to kind of feel that out, sense that, and go for the more aggressive line.
Right. So Amaz is actually gonna, you know, win the series to 2-1. So he's back into it. I like the fact that he went for this Druid Mirror. I have to imagine it's a comfort thing, right? Like, Druid is one of those classes that, from what I've seen of Amaz, he does really tend to favor. And maybe he realizes that because his Mech Mage isn't as dense in mechs as most other lists, that maybe it doesn't necessarily give him as big of an edge against Druid.
Right. Well, it doesn't really matter which order he goes in for. We are playing Conquest, so you do have to win with every deck. Basically, like you said, more of a comfort thing. Maybe wants to show off what he's got in the Druid Mirror. If he were to go down, you know, and just kind of mount this comeback in the way he wants it, show off the decks he's more skilled with, try and get a win on those. Obviously, Druid, I would say, is probably Amaz's favorite class out of these, and he's also performed pretty well with that Mage. So we'll have to see what he goes with next. Either way, does have to win with both, though.
Yeah, so next, we talked about the fact that what Amaz has remaining is that Tempo Mage, or the Mech Mage rather, and he has the Handlock. And Handlock does have kind of a, I wouldn't say unfavorable, but it's not the greatest matchup against Handlock. So I would definitely expect the Mech Mage to come out this time. And if Amaz can kind of get that early lineup of something, or that early draw of something like a Noyatron, Mech Warper, Clockwork Gnome, those kind of cards that allow him to get the board early, and he doesn't draw into the later stuff, and he doesn't draw into Unstable Portal, he should have a pretty straightforward game against Allandang.
Yeah, Allandang's kind of just looking at this situation as, you know, hopefully within one of these next 2 games, I get that Druid draw that lets me make decisions, that lets me show why I'm here, you know. Professional player, playing to make it to regionals, and we'll have to see if this is that game. Amaz does have that pretty solid opening you just talked about with the Mana Worm into the Unstable Portal.
Yeah, so we'll see. He actually chooses to keep that Mana Worm in Unstable Portal. He doesn't go digging for mechs. What he does get is a Goblin Blast Mage in return for a Loatheb, so he will at least have a very straightforward play of Mana Worm, Unstable Portal, and Frostbolt could also prove to be pretty huge if Darnassus Aspirant shows up.
Yeah, Allandang definitely has options this game, so going to be a bit closer than last game. Even picks up that Innervate, so he could Innervate the Shade out. He should know that this is Mech Mage. Nothing like Flame Cannon going to come out and ruin his Shade's day. He could maybe Innervate the Shade. Could also Innervate Shredder. I do think it's really important for him to get on this board early, though, and then supplement whatever minion he chooses with that turn 2 Wrath onto the Mana Worm.
All right, whatever he plays here, if he goes for the Shade or, the Piloted Shredder, Amaz is going to have two radically different plays next turn. So we see he actually goes for the Shade. So obviously Amaz is not capable of just getting that off of the board. So he's going to go ahead and Stable Portal. And
wow.
Yellow Light Bane is
It's really solid simply because it's just a 3/4.
For 2.
Yeah.
And it buffs the Mana Worm. So, he probably, well, no, because he has Clockwork Gnome. So there's a world where, maybe Clockwork Gnome comes down next turn, maybe the Light Bane survives, and then...
Yeah, there is a very slight chance he would be able to activate the effect, but...
Right. Still solid either way.
For now, it's basically a fancy-looking Spider Tank. It's without the mech, which is actually... It's worse than Spider Tank here.
In this situation, yes.
Come back, Spider Tank. We miss you.
Spider Tank's probably sitting at home like, that could have been me.
That could have been me.
Clockwork.
He's out drinking with War Golem.
Look at this. Clockwork Gnome comes down. I called it. And then maybe you just hero power it. Maybe just to make it all right. No. You probably don't hero power it. So Amaz's turn, not necessarily the greatest. He has some choices to make here. He could just Frostbolt face to deny hero power.
Yeah, he's going to go for that.
Yep.
I think he really just wants to guarantee that Clockwork Gnome survives so he gets the Blast Mage value off next turn, which will let him pick off that Shade if it trades into the Light Bane.
All right, so yeah, the Pilot Shredder comes down.
One thing I'd really like to see from Allandang here is to trade into the Clockwork Gnome. That'd be pretty insane play. Doesn't go for it, unfortunately.
Well, the 3/4 represents the biggest body and the threat right?
Right.
So Goblin Blast Mage represents the threat you may consider.
Well, I do think he could have kind of read into it. And also the other thing is you can't really get too punished because your Shade's at a 4/2.
Ooh. Oh, yeah. I was thinking for a second the Amani Berserker dropped for the Mage. And it was
well, he can Wrath his own Berserker to trade.
There you go.
Without that Wrath pickup, the Amani Berserker wasn't that amazing. Just a pretty vanilla 2/3, but now he can also just cycle Wrath, develop that Darnassus, and trade off with Amaz's board.
Yeah, this is a very real example of, what comes down from the Shredder forces you sometimes to make these decisions. And the Amani Berserker coming down and drawing into the Wrath means that he can make that into a 5/2 to really handily deal with the Blast Mage. And he can even put down a Darnassus Aspirant if he wants to and kind of start accelerating towards that Ancient of War, which is absolutely going to give the Mech Mage fits.
Yeah. I mean, if that Darnassus Aspirant sticks around for too long, like you said, going to accelerate him into the Ancient War, not really much in Amaz's deck to deal with that.
Yeah, Mech Mage definitely does not deal well with that. So, okay, Darnassus Aspirant, and wow, look at that. Off the cycle, he gets through to the Claw, so Allandang will have a pretty solid line of play next turn if he wants to go that route.
Yeah, Amaz picks up another Clockwork Gnome, so he can now get off Goblin Blast Mage number 2 later in this game. Could go for that right now. It'd be somewhere in the 30 to 40% chance that he would kill off that Dalaran Aspirant, which could be huge. And he's going to go for that. Yeah.
He's going for it. Let's see if there's some Amaz math
going for the
action.
huge play.
Yeah, it doesn't pan out. Does do 3 damage to the face, though, which,
Yeah, it's an aggressive line.
Right. Ooh, Kazan Mystic.
Not going to do anything against this variant of Mage. No secrets in here.
Yeah, so I had actually not seen Kazan Mystic just yet. So Force of Nature actually comes out, and that's going to really handily clear the board.
Yeah.
And obviously Amaz is sitting on 2 cards, and Allandang's probably been paying attention and realizes, at this point 2 now are spare parts, and then there's the one, Fel Reaver.
Yeah, and now Allandang's like really happy that Dalaran Aspirant somehow survived over 2 turns, and he can get out that Ancient War early. Going to really go a long way towards contesting something like Fel Reaver, which we might see hit the board. Looks like Amaz is considering, do I want to freeze spare part maybe? Do I want to play Shredder and maybe play around Big Game Hunter? And he's like, no, of course not. Why else would I have Fel Reaver in my deck?
Dr. Boom off the top. So this is interesting. I have to think you go with Ancient of War because you're at 17 health and there's a Fel Reaver on the board.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously Dr. Boom is always tempting to play.
I think you're safe enough to go for the Ancient of War, whereas Dr. Boom definitely opens up the possibility that you could lose. Mills off Amaz's Dr. Boom. Obviously, it's kind of, some people have called this Schrodinger's Fireball, where it could very well have just been on the bottom of your deck, but knowing that there's no Boom coming out on 7, knowing one Fireball has been burned will help Allandang make choices later in this game.
Spider Tank!
There he is.
There you are, Chacky. We found your Spider Tank.
Yeah, look at him.
It's so
just
happy.
chugging away.
Yeah, just a happy golden Spider Tank. So, Amaz is now looking at this giant tree, which, as TJ has called it, a St. Bernard, but it's actually a tree. He's looking at it. How do I get through it?
Yeah, and it's really awkward is the main thing. This is why Ancient War lined up so well into this board. Amaz can only do 9, which means it would leave a 5-1 or a 5-2 if he doesn't ping, which obviously there's really no reason to ping. Which would easily then just trade back into the Fel Reaver after, you know, Allandang makes use of the mill mechanic, gets rid of some more cards from Amaz's deck, and deals with it pretty easily.
Yeah, he could freeze it. So he could freeze it and kind of trade on his own terms, but it's basically, you know, ends to the same destination as you pointed out. And there's just nothing straightforward. Amaz, probably the most mana-efficient play is just to play down the Shredder and the Spider Tank.
Right. Could go for, actually you mentioned, like you could freeze it, put your Fel Reaver into it, and ping it along with the Shredder. That would let you ping it off the very next turn. Gonna opt for just playing out the minions. We'll have to see if he, doesn't even go into it though, so it's gonna be a long way to get through that taunt.
Be interesting to see how much Allandang values getting rid of it, because he's probably pretty aware that, you know, Amaz is not running an Iron Beak Owl. He doesn't have a Spellbreaker. There's probably no polymorphs in
unstable
here.
portal.
True.
Could get any of those and more.
We have seen before the unstable Sportle, so it could happen. Curious to see how much Allandang values getting rid of this Fel Reaver, though, if he chooses to go.
Well, he can't really,
we could throw
unless he wants to hero power it for 8 to his face.
I mean,
he could Druid
could inefficiently trade.
He could really inefficiently get rid of it.
Right.
I don't think he's going to go for that.
Right.
Probably going to go for more of the efficient trades, like maybe the Ancient War into the Spider Tank. Maybe set up another taunt. Could just throw down Dr. Boom because it challenges the Fel Reaver so well going into the next turn.
The only consideration I have, and I'm probably just being too afraid here, is, you know, if you just trade the Ancient of War into the Spider Tank, then a Fireball and a Ping gets rid of it. Fel Reaver can start hitting you in the face. That said, it's still a 2-turn lethal at that point.
He knows one Fireball's gone. We've seen one get burned, and he knows the 2 cards in hand are spare parts, so it'd have to be a top deck. There's the unstable portal. Could be Black Knight.
I'm saying Deathwing. It's always Deathwing.
We'll have to see. I mean, Amaz is just kind of sitting there, but we know he has to go for this.
Right. Allandang's board is rapidly getting unwieldy. And that Fel Reaver is it's like a pacifist Fel Reaver. He just kind of comes out, I don't want to fight you guys.
Yeah, he just wants to mill your own deck.
Yeah, that's all he's doing, just milling cards. So Amaz is probably going to realize that he at some point has to go for the unstable portal.
I'd probably go for it first in case you get Black Knight.
Right, so let's see what happens. Okay, so he freezes Dr. Boom. That's fine. Dr. Boom needs to be put on ice.
Oh, he's going to replay. So he's not going to unstable portal. This makes actually a lot of sense. Going to freeze up that Dr. Boom and try to lock up a Fel Reaver hit to the face next turn to maybe end the game.
See,
I didn't even spot this.
I was going to say, that's why Amaz is here, and, you know, I'm at this desk, because I would have just gone right for the portal. I'm like, show me door number 1.
Show me the Black Knight.
Yeah, I want my Deathwing. Where in the line do I get my Deathwing? And Allandang, this is, I mean, obviously Amaz has put Dr. Boom on ice, but Allandang's still in a really good spot.
Unfortunately, it was a really clever play from Amaz, but Allandang has a really solid answer. He can taunt up, he can swipe and run all of his minions into the Fel Reaver. Now he knows both Fireballs are gone. He knows he can't be burned out. He has a taunt up. Like, from here on out, Allandang's pretty much sure, especially with a bomb hit, that he can end this game.
Yeah, and we'll see the swipe come out here. You can just get rid of that Fel Reaver. There's Blood Knight, there's the Annoyatron, Nanoware. Yeah. Amaz is just in a bad spot unless he gets that Deathwing.
Okay.
All right.
Well, now you have to go for it. There's literally nothing else.
Right. It's Frigid Snowball.
It's my friend, the Frigid Snowball.
I know you two have been getting real chummy lately, but
yeah.
And there's no Doomsayer in there. Not that it probably wouldn't have mattered much. Amaz is just playing down what's in his hand. Yeah. So Frigid Snowball.
He's not taking that snowball.
No, nobody takes candles or snowballs from kobolds or snowbolts. It's kind of a little.
Well, from here on out, it's pretty much cleanup duty for Allandang. I mean, he's at a very healthy life total. He knows both Fireballs are gone. Amaz is absolutely out of resources.
Yeah, Allandang can just basically grind this one out on his own.
Amaz just has nothing left in his deck. The piloted Sky Golem is gone. The Dr. Boom is gone. Both Fel Reavers are gone. His entire top end has been exhausted. Both Fireballs exhausted, both unstable portals, which could be top-end threats, are gone. So Allandang is just going to lock it up with this move.
Yeah, and we'll see what Amaz draws. Maybe like something like a Flame Strike can help him. Cogmaster doesn't do it.
This is pretty much what you have to expect when you draw your deck. Not really in the wrong order. He did have a 1-drop this game, but when you play so many 1-drops, you do really kind of weaken your late-game draws.
Right, and I think Amaz is maybe holding out for that top deck Flame Strike. You know, this is it for him. So he's really going to go ahead and just give it his all.
Yeah,
he's not going to concede prematurely.
He's not throwing in the towel, but
Allandang definitely has a commanding spot.
Allandang can see the finish line.
See the Wild Growth probably come out here. Just nope, even just Shape Chip. So he's just going to do a little more damage.
Yeah,
little chip damage. He's going to hit with the minions. Even trades out for the Cogmaster. So just
you're not even going to kill any of Allandang's minions.
Yeah, and obviously very smart from Allandang, playing safe. Snow Checker comes out, and I do believe, Allandang has lethal on board. Amaz gives the well played. Very well played series by Amaz. Unfortunately, Allandang, played better at the end of the day. Ended up winning the series, and that's going to be at 3-1. Amaz is unfortunately out of the running for the North American Qualifier tournament and will not be fighting on to try to make it to the Americas Championship. But Allandang will, so
yeah,
congratulations to him on a well-played series.
Yep, Allandang now only a couple matches away from securing his ticket to the regional finals. So look to see him tomorrow. Good things coming out of him. I really like the fact that he brought that Malagos Warlock deck. He's the only one with it still in the tournament. I don't think we saw that too much, though, in this tournament, and it's been working out great for him.
Yeah, and up next we have, I don't want to say necessarily a battle of the Titans, but a pretty big battle all the same between Reynad and Bloodyface. Bloodyface was kind of one of those unknowns who came into the North American Qualifier tournament. Has really made a name for himself, in all of his streamed matches. Obviously, everyone knows Reynad. Reynad continues to be, since Hyped was removed, Reynad's the pick I'm rooting for. So hopefully,
you're on that Tempo Storm life.
I'm on that Tempo Storm life.
Well, he is the last representative for them.
Right.
Firebat's still alive for Archon. So if you're a fan of either of those teams, stay tuned. Watch for this Reynad match.
Yeah, we'll be right back after a short break, guys, with more of the Hearthstone North American Qualifier Tournament.